The doctors had already run out of answers. But one faithful dog refused to give up. The steady beep of a heart monitor echoed through room 214 of St. Mary's Children's Hospital in Wilmington, North Carolina. Outside the window, a cold November rain tapped softly against the glass, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of gold and silver. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. Machines hummed. Nurses moved quietly through the hallway. And in the center of it all lay 8-year-old Emily Walker. She looked impossibly small beneath the white hospital blanket. Her pale fingers rested motionless at her sides. A stuffed rabbit sat beside her pillow, worn from years of love. The room was warm, yet a strange chill seemed to cling to everything inside it. Captain Daniel Walker sat beside her bed, his broad shoulders slumped beneath an old Marine Corps jacket. At 38 years old, Daniel had endured desert heat, ocean storms, and deployments that tested every ounce of strength he possessed. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him to watch his daughter fade day by day while he stood powerless to stop it. His rough hand gently held hers. It felt smaller than he remembered, weaker. He stared at the monitor as if sheer determination could force the numbers higher. Across the room, Dr. Helen Carter quietly reviewed another chart. She was one of the best pediatric specialists in the state. For weeks, she had searched for answers. For weeks, she had refused to surrender hope. Tonight, however, the exhaustion showed in her eyes. She lowered the chart and looked toward Daniel. He already knew what she was going to say before she spoke. "We're doing everything we can," she said softly. Daniel nodded without looking up. He had heard those words too many times. They no longer sounded like hope. They sounded like goodbye. Rainwater slid slowly down the window. Somewhere down the hallway, a distant announcement crackled through the hospital speakers. Emily did not move. Daniel brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead. His chest tightened. 8 years old. Just 8. She should have been riding her bicycle through the neighborhood. She should have been laughing at cartoons with cereal milk on her upper lip. She should have been asking for one more bedtime story. Instead, she lay surrounded by machines that could measure life but could not guarantee it. Daniel swallowed hard and reached into his pocket. His fingers wrapped around a pair of worn military dog tags. The metal felt cold against his skin. He closed his eyes. For a moment, memories drifted through the darkness. Emily running across a summer lawn. Emily laughing as a German Shepherd puppy chased a tennis ball twice his size. Emily hugging that dog so tightly that neither seemed to know where one ended and the other began. Daniel opened his eyes again. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Outside, thunder rumbled far over the Atlantic. Inside room 214, the night seemed to hold its breath. And miles away, beneath another storm-dark sky, a German Shepherd named Rex suddenly lifted his head and stared toward the distant hospital as though he sensed something no machine ever could. The rain continued through the night. Thick clouds rolled over the North Carolina coastline, hiding the moon and turning the world outside into a blur of darkness and silver reflections. Nearly 12 miles from St. Mary's Children's Hospital, Rex lay on the hardwood floor of the Walker family home. Usually, he slept near the front door. Tonight was different. The 6-year-old German Shepherd stood suddenly and paced across the living room. His nails clicked softly against the floorboards. His ears remained forward, alert, listening, watching, waiting. The old grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily. The sound seemed unusually loud in the empty house. Rex stopped beside the couch where Emily used to curl up beneath a blanket every evening. A faded pink pillow still rested there. He lowered his nose and inhaled deeply. Her scent lingered faintly in the fabric. Warm memories seemed to echo through the silent room. The smell of peanut butter treats. The laughter that followed games of fetch. Small hands wrapped around his neck. Rex let out a low whine. Not loud, just enough to disturb the stillness. Months earlier, before the hospital visits became routine, Emily had spent every afternoon with him in the backyard. Daniel often watched from the porch after work. Emily would throw a tennis ball across the grass, and Rex would race after it, as if every throw were the most important mission of his life. Sometimes she would sit beside him beneath the oak tree and read stories aloud. Rex never understood the words, but he always listened. Every page, every chapter, every adventure. Daniel used to joke that Rex knew the stories better than anyone. Back then, Emily laughed easily. Back then, the house felt full. Rex walked toward the hallway. The scent of Emily remained everywhere. On the staircase, along the walls, on the blanket folded beside her bedroom door. He climbed the stairs slowly and entered her room. Moonlight slipped through the curtains. Toys remained exactly where she had left them. A half-finished puzzle sat on the desk. Crayons rested inside a small yellow box. Beside the bed stood a framed photograph. Emily smiling. Daniel standing behind her. Rex sitting proudly between them. The dog stared at the picture for several long seconds. Then something changed. His body stiffened. His ears lifted higher. A strange unease seemed to ripple through him. Animals did not understand hospitals. They did not understand diagnoses. They did not understand medical charts. But sometimes they sensed absence. Sometimes they sensed when someone they loved needed them. Down at the hospital, Daniel remained beside Emily's bed. The clock on the wall showed 2:17 in the morning. Dr. Helen Carter quietly stepped into the room, carrying another report. The expression on her face revealed little, but Daniel noticed the hesitation before she spoke. It was enough. His heart sank. Outside, another distant roll of thunder crossed the sky. Inside the Walker home, Rex suddenly turned toward the door. Without hesitation, he hurried downstairs. His tail remained still. His breathing quickened. Something deep inside him was pulling him forward. And for the first time since Emily had been admitted to the hospital, Rex moved as though he knew exactly where he needed to go. The storm had weakened by dawn, but the air still carried the scent of wet pavement and salt drifting inland from the Atlantic. St. Mary's Children's Hospital glowed softly against the gray morning sky. Inside, the night shift moved quietly through the halls, their footsteps muted by polished floors and long hours. Daniel had not slept. He remained beside Emily's bed, watching every rise and fall of her chest, as though each breath were a gift that could disappear without warning. The coffee in his paper cup had long gone cold. Across the room, Dr. Helen Carter reviewed fresh notes while monitors continued their steady rhythm. Nothing had improved. Nothing had worsened. The uncertainty felt heavier than bad news. Then Daniel's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. It was a security alert from home. Motion detected at the front door. Under normal circumstances, he would have ignored it. Today, something made him open the camera feed. The image appeared grainy in the dim morning light. His front door stood slightly open, and standing outside was Rex. Daniel frowned. He had locked the house before leaving. He watched as the German shepherd paced back and forth across the porch. Then Rex stopped and stared directly toward the camera. The dog's chest rose rapidly. His ears were forward. His posture was tense. Not frightened. Determined. Daniel felt a strange knot form in his stomach. He enlarged the image. Rex suddenly disappeared from the frame. Seconds later, another alert appeared. Motion detected at the driveway. Then another. The dog was moving away from the house. Fast. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. He knew Rex better than anyone. This was not normal behavior. For 6 years, the dog had been calm, disciplined, almost impossibly intuitive. Especially when it came to Emily. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Emily was 6 years old, running a mild fever after a school field trip. Before anyone noticed symptoms, Rex had refused to leave her side. He stayed beside her bed for nearly 2 days. Another time, after Emily twisted her ankle during a soccer game, Rex began limping beside her despite having no injury himself. Somehow he always seemed to know when something was wrong. Daniel looked toward his daughter. Her face remained pale beneath the hospital lights. Dr. Carter approached quietly. "Any family coming this morning?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "No family," he answered softly. Then after a moment he added, "Just a dog." The doctor offered a sympathetic smile. Daniel stared again at the phone screen. A new notification appeared. This time it came from a traffic camera 2 blocks from the hospital. The image captured a familiar black and tan shape racing along the sidewalk despite the rain. Rex, heading in only one possible direction, towards St. Mary's. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Something inside him whispered that this was more than coincidence, more than loyalty. Miles of city streets separated the hospital from home, yet the German shepherd was coming. Not wandering, not searching, coming with purpose. And as another monitor sounded softly beside Emily's bed, Daniel found himself watching the hospital door through the glass window, wondering what could be so important that a faithful dog would cross an entire city to deliver it. By mid-morning, the rain had faded into a fine mist that drifted across the hospital parking lot like smoke over calm water. Inside St. Mary's, the atmosphere remained heavy. Nurses exchanged quiet conversations at their stations. Visitors moved through the corridors carrying flowers, balloons, and hopeful smiles. Room 214 felt different. Time seemed slower there. Daniel sat beside Emily and watched the monitor trace its steady green line across the screen. Every few minutes, he glanced toward the hallway. He told himself he was being foolish. Dogs did not navigate cities. Dogs did not cross miles of unfamiliar streets to reach hospitals. Yet something deep inside him refused to dismiss the possibility. Then his phone rang. Hospital security. Daniel answered immediately. Captain Walker? A voice asked. Yes. There was a pause. This may sound strange, but we have a German Shepherd at the main entrance. He appears extremely determined to get inside. One of our guards found a contact tag on his collar with your number. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. Rex. Somehow the dog had made it. Please do not send him away, Daniel said quietly. I am coming down. Less than 3 minutes later, the elevator doors opened onto the lobby. Daniel spotted Rex instantly. The German Shepherd stood near the reception desk, damp from the long journey, but otherwise unharmed. Several visitors had gathered nearby. One little boy pointed excitedly. An elderly woman smiled through tears. Rex ignored them all. His amber eyes locked onto Daniel. For a brief second, Daniel expected the dog to run toward him. Instead, Rex moved past him, straight toward the elevators. Rex, Daniel called softly. The dog stopped but did not return. He looked back only long enough to make certain Daniel was following. The behavior was unusual, almost urgent. Security allowed them through after a brief explanation. As the elevator climbed, Rex remained perfectly still. His ears stayed forward. His breathing was calm but focused. When the doors opened on Emily's floor, the dog stepped out immediately. Several nurses smiled at the sight of him. One even whispered that perhaps the little girl could use a familiar friend. Daniel hoped she was right. They reached room 214. Rex paused at the doorway. The sounds of machines drifted into the hall. The faint scent of disinfectant lingered in the air. Sunlight finally broke through the clouds outside, sending a pale beam across Emily's blanket. For several seconds, the German Shepherd simply stared. Then he entered, not with excitement, not with relief. Something else, something far more serious. He approached the bed slowly and stopped beside Emily. His nose twitched once, twice. His entire posture changed. The muscles along his shoulders tightened. His ears lifted higher. He did not nuzzle her hand. He did not lick her fingers. He did not behave like a dog greeting someone he loved. Instead, he stared toward the clear tubing running from the intravenous line beside her bed. Dr. Helen Carter happened to be entering the room when she noticed it. Rex took one step closer to the equipment. Then another. A low whine escaped his throat. Not fear. Not sadness. A warning. Daniel felt a chill move through him as the German Shepherd fixed his eyes on the hanging medication bag and refused to look away. For a moment, nobody spoke. The room seemed to shrink around the sound of Rex's soft whine. Dr. Helen Carter glanced from the dog to the intravenous line, then back again. What is it, boy? Daniel whispered. Rex moved closer. His nose hovered near the clear tubing. He inhaled once, then turned his head toward Emily. His ears remained rigid. His body remained tense. The German Shepherd let out another low sound from deep in his chest. It was not loud enough to alarm anyone outside the room, but it carried a strange urgency. Daniel had seen that look before, during training exercises, during storms, during moments when Rex sensed something others had overlooked. Dr. Carter stepped toward the medication stand. This is unusual, she admitted quietly. One of the nurses smiled nervously. Maybe he is reacting to the hospital smell. Perhaps. Yet Rex did not react to the room. He reacted to one thing. The hanging medication bag. The doctor folded her arms and studied it for a moment. Then she reached for Emily's chart. What medication was started during the night? She asked. The nurse reviewed the records. The updated treatment from the overnight consultation, she replied. Administered at 12:47 this morning. Dr. Carter's expression changed slightly. That was the adjustment from the new recommendation. Yes, doctor. Rex suddenly pressed his nose against the side of the bed and released another soft whine. Daniel felt his heart begin to race. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. The The sunlight outside grew brighter, casting warm reflections across the floor. Yet a growing unease settled over the room. Dr. Carter reviewed the chart again. Then she reviewed it a second time. Her eyes moved more slowly now, more carefully. "Wait," she said. The nurse looked up. "What is it?" Dr. Carter pointed toward a notation near the bottom of the page. This dosage was adjusted after the consultation, but Emily's sensitivity screening was performed before that recommendation arrived. The nurse blinked. "You think there could be a reaction?" "I do not know," Dr. Carter answered honestly. "But I want to know." She immediately ordered a review of every medication administered during the previous 12 hours. Additional lab work was requested. Pharmacy records were pulled. Specialists were contacted. The room became busy with quiet purpose. Through it all, Rex never moved away from the bed. He sat beside Emily and watched every person who approached the intravenous line. Nearly 40 minutes passed. Daniel remained standing beside the window, unable to shake the feeling that something important was unfolding. Finally, Dr. Carter returned carrying fresh reports. Her face was pale. "Daniel," she said softly, "we found something." The room fell silent. "Emily appears to be experiencing a rare adverse response to one of the adjusted medications. The symptoms closely resemble progression of her illness, which is why it was so difficult to identify." Daniel stared at her. For several seconds he could not speak. "You mean?" "I mean we may have been treating the wrong problem since early this morning." His eyes filled with emotion. He looked down at Rex. The German shepherd had finally relaxed. The tension in his shoulders eased. His ears lowered slightly. And for the first time since entering the room, he rested his head gently on the edge of Emily's blanket, as though he knew the real fight had finally begun. The next several hours felt longer than the entire week that had come before them. Doctors adjusted Emily's treatment plan immediately. The medication was discontinued. New monitoring procedures were put in place. Specialists moved in and out of room 214 carrying tablets, charts, and quiet determination. Yet no one offered promises. They had identified a problem. Now they had to wait and see whether her small body could recover from it. Daniel remained beside the bed through every minute. He barely noticed the passage of time. The pale afternoon sunlight gradually shifted across the floor before fading into the softer gold of early evening. Outside the hospital window, the storm clouds finally broke apart, revealing patches of blue sky over the Atlantic coast. Rex stayed where he had chosen to be, near Emily. Always near Emily. Nurses brought him water. Visitors smiled when they passed the room. One elderly volunteer even left a small blanket for him. But the German shepherd seemed interested in only one thing: the little girl sleeping peacefully beside him. As the hours passed, Daniel found himself studying the dog more than the monitors. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. 5 years earlier. Summer. Emily was only 3. Grace Walker stood barefoot in the backyard while fireflies danced through the warm North Carolina air. She laughed as Rex chased bubbles drifting across the lawn. Daniel remembered the way Grace knelt beside the young dog and placed her hand gently against his neck. "He pays attention differently," she had said. "What do you mean?" Daniel had asked. Grace smiled. "Most dogs watch what people do. Rex watches how people feel." At the time, Daniel thought it sounded like something only a mother would say. Now, sitting inside a hospital room years later, those words returned with surprising force. Grace had always understood things others overlooked. She had noticed small changes, tiny details, quiet warnings. Perhaps that was why Emily adored her so much. Daniel looked toward the photograph on the bedside table. It showed all 4 of them together during a beach trip years ago. Emily grinning, Grace holding a sun hat against the wind, Rex sitting proudly in the sand. A family frozen inside a happier season of life. His throat tightened. Grace had been gone for nearly 4 years, yet some days her absence still felt fresh. Especially today. Especially now. As if sensing the shift in his emotions, Rex lifted his head and looked directly at him. Their eyes met across the room. Daniel managed a small smile. "You knew something was wrong," he whispered. "Did she teach you that too?" The German shepherd blinked slowly and rested his head once more against the blanket. Evening settled over the hospital. The lights outside the city began to glow. Nurses prepared for another shift change. Then, just after 7 o'clock, a sound broke the silence. A faint movement, so small that Daniel thought he imagined it. He immediately leaned forward. His breath caught. Emily's fingers had moved. Only slightly. Barely enough to wrinkle the blanket. Yet it happened. Daniel looked toward the monitor, then back to her hand. His heart pounded. Across the room, Rex rose to his feet. His ears lifted. His tail gave one slow wag. For the first time in many days, hope did not feel distant. It felt close enough to touch. The movement lasted less than a second, but it changed everything. Daniel pressed the call button with trembling fingers. Within moments, nurses entered the room followed by Dr. Helen Carter. Everyone watched carefully as Emily's hand rested quietly on the blanket once again. For a brief moment Daniel worried he had imagined it. Exhaustion could do strange things to the mind. Then it happened again. A slight curl of her fingers. Small, delicate, real. Dr. Carter immediately stepped closer. The monitor beside the bed continued its steady rhythm, but something else had changed. Tiny responses were beginning to return. The doctor checked several readings and exchanged a glance with the nursing staff. It was the first hopeful look Daniel had seen on anyone's face in days. "Keep talking to her," Dr. Carter said softly. "Sometimes familiar voices help more than we understand." Daniel nodded. When the room quieted again, he pulled his chair closer to the bed. The evening sky outside had deepened into shades of blue and violet. Lights from distant buildings shimmered against the dark horizon. Rex remained beside Emily, watching her with unwavering attention. Daniel reached for her hand. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered. "It is Dad." His voice cracked slightly. "You do not have to hurry. Just keep fighting one step at a time." The room fell silent except for the gentle hum of machines. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The hospital settled into its nighttime rhythm. Somewhere down the hallway a cart rolled softly across the floor. A nurse laughed quietly at a distant station. Life continued moving around them. Inside room 214, every second revolved around a little girl and the people who loved her. Around 10 o'clock, Daniel noticed Rex lift his head again. The German shepherd moved closer to the bed and rested his chin near Emily's arm. His tail tapped lightly against the floor once, twice. Then Emily's eyelids fluttered. Daniel froze. The movement was faint but unmistakable. "Doctor," he called quietly. Dr. Carter arrived moments later. Everyone watched. Emily's eyelashes trembled again. Slowly, painfully slowly, her eyes opened halfway before closing once more. The effort seemed to exhaust her. Yet the sight alone brought tears to Daniel's eyes. "That is a good sign," Dr. Carter said gently. "A very good sign." Relief swept through the room like warm sunlight after a long storm. For the first time, the fear that had gripped Daniel's chest began to loosen. Not disappear. Not yet. But loosen. After the doctor left, Daniel sat quietly beside the bed. He looked down at Rex and shook his head in disbelief. "You stubborn old soldier," he whispered. The dog responded by lifting one ear. Daniel laughed softly. It was the first genuine laugh he had managed in what felt like forever. Near midnight, while Emily rested peacefully, Daniel stepped into the hallway to stretch his legs. A nurse approached carrying a small storage box that had been delivered from the Walker home earlier that evening. Inside were a few personal items requested for Emily's room. Daniel opened it absently. A coloring book, a favorite blanket, several family photographs. Then he noticed something tucked beneath them. A worn leather journal. Grace's journal. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. He had not seen it in years. Slowly, he opened the cover, unaware that the pages inside were about to reveal a forgotten piece of the story that connected Emily, Grace, and Rex more deeply than he had ever known. Daniel carried the journal back into the room and sat beneath the soft glow of the bedside lamp. The hospital had grown quiet. Most visitors were gone. The hallway seemed wrapped in a peaceful stillness broken only by distant footsteps and the gentle rhythm of medical equipment. Rex remained beside Emily, his eyes half closed but never fully asleep. Daniel opened the journal carefully. Grace's handwriting filled the pages. Familiar, elegant, alive in a way that made his chest ache. He turned through notes about family trips, birthday parties, and small moments that once seemed ordinary. Then he reached an entry dated nearly 5 years earlier. His eyes stopped. The page described Emily during a childhood illness. Nothing serious. Just a stubborn fever that lingered longer than expected. Yet Grace had written several paragraphs about Rex. Daniel read slowly. Rex notices changes before anyone else. He becomes restless when Emily does not feel well. He watches her breathing. He watches her movements. Sometimes I think he notices things we cannot see. Daniel frowned and continued reading. Another entry appeared several months later. Grace had begun teaching Rex simple scent recognition exercises using clothing, blankets, and medical samples provided during a community training event. It started as a game, a way to challenge an intelligent dog. Over time, Rex became remarkably accurate at identifying unusual changes connected to Emily's health. Grace had documented everything: dates, observations, results. Daniel sat back in stunned silence. The answer had been sitting inside this journal for years. Nothing supernatural, nothing impossible, just a devoted dog and a mother who paid attention. His gaze drifted toward Rex. The German shepherd opened one eye and looked back at him. "You remembered," Daniel whispered. "All this time, you remembered." The dog thumped his tail once against the floor. At that exact moment, another small sound came from the bed. Daniel turned instantly. Emily's eyes were open. Not halfway. Not for a second. Open. Clear blue eyes blinked beneath the hospital lights. Confused. Tired. Alive. "Dad." The word was barely louder than a whisper. Daniel felt the world stop. He was beside her in an instant, gently holding her hand. Tears blurred his vision. "I am here, sweetheart." Emily looked around the room slowly before her gaze settled on the familiar shape beside her bed. A faint smile touched her lips. Rex came. The German shepherd immediately stood and rested his head beside her arm. Emily's fingers found the fur behind his ears. The simple gesture brought tears to every nurse who later heard about it. Dr. Helen Carter arrived minutes afterward and confirmed what everyone hoped. Emily was responding, truly responding. The crisis had passed. Recovery would take time, but the danger that had haunted the room for days was finally beginning to fade. As the first light of dawn appeared beyond the window, painting the horizon with shades of gold and pale blue, Daniel sat quietly beside his daughter. Emily drifted peacefully back to sleep with one hand resting on Rex's neck. The journal lay open on the chair beside him. Grace's words seemed to linger in the air, not as instructions, not as explanations, more like a gentle reminder that love leaves traces behind, sometimes in memories, sometimes in habits, and sometimes in the faithful heart of a dog who never forgets. 3 weeks later, spring sunlight spilled across the Walker family home for the first time in what felt like years. The oak tree in the backyard had begun to bloom again. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass through the open kitchen window. Life had not returned all at once. It had arrived slowly, one small blessing at a time. Emily still tired easily. Some afternoons, she needed long naps. Some mornings began with doctor appointments and careful routines. Yet she was home. That simple truth felt miraculous enough. Daniel often found himself pausing in the middle of ordinary moments just to appreciate them. The sound of Emily laughing from the living room. The sight of her bicycle resting beside the porch. The way sunlight caught her blonde hair when she ran across the yard. These were things he once assumed would always be there. Now each one felt precious. On a warm Saturday morning, Emily sat beneath the old oak tree with a sketchbook balanced on her knees. Rex lay beside her, stretched comfortably in the grass. His muzzle was beginning to show more silver than before, but his eyes remained bright and watchful. Every so often Emily reached down to scratch behind his ears without even looking up from her drawing. It was a habit so natural neither of them seemed aware of it. Daniel stood on the porch holding a cup of coffee. Around his neck hung the same military dog tags he had carried through deployments, storms, and sleepless nights at the hospital. For a long moment, he simply watched them together. The little girl, the faithful dog, the quiet peace that had returned to their home. Inside the house, Grace's journal rested on a shelf beside a framed family photograph. Daniel no longer saw it as a reminder of loss. He saw it as a reminder of presence. Love had a way of remaining, sometimes through words left behind, sometimes through lessons passed forward, sometimes through a dog who remembered what others forgot. Emily suddenly looked up from her sketchbook. "Dad," she called, "come see this." Daniel walked across the yard and knelt beside her. On the page was a drawing of 3 figures standing together beneath a bright sky. A little girl, a German shepherd, and a woman with a warm smile standing just behind them. Grace. Daniel felt emotion rise in his chest. "It is beautiful," he said softly. Emily smiled. "Mom would like it." Daniel nodded. "Yes," he answered. "I think she would." Rex rested his head against Emily's leg and closed his eyes. The afternoon sun warmed the grass around them. Somewhere nearby, birds sang from the branches overhead. No speeches were needed. No grand explanations. Some stories do not end with answers. They end with gratitude. With a child given another chance. With a father learning how to hope again. With a faithful German shepherd resting beneath an oak tree, unaware that he had become the quiet hero of a family's miracle. And in the peaceful silence of that backyard, it felt as though grace itself had finally come home.